Her sister stole her mate again until the Alpha King found the Omega behind the waterfall. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Claire Sanders stood alone in the center of the grand hall, her heart heavy with grief. She had been dreaming of this moment for years, the moment her mate would finally claim her in front of everyone, to honor their bond. But instead, she stood there, humiliated, watching as her older sister, Olivia Sanders, stole her place. Olivia, with her beauty, her charm, and her perfect scent, had always overshadowed Claire. But never had Claire imagined her sister would take the one thing that mattered most to her. As Claire's mate stepped forward to claim Olivia, her breath hitched. He was the one she had dreamed of, the one whose touch she had longed for, but it was her sister who had won his heart. The crowd, once warm and welcoming, now felt cold and judgmental as Claire was left standing there, abandoned, humiliated in front of her own family. Her heart shattered, her legs felt like they might give way beneath her, but she held herself together, refusing to let her tears fall in front of them. The whispers of the crowd grew louder. "She's nothing," they murmured. "The Omega is broken." But Claire didn't care about their whispers. She cared about him, the man she had always known was meant to be hers, who was now with someone else. With a last glance at the pair in the center of the room, Claire turned and fled, rushing out of the hall into the cold night. The moonlight guided her as she ran into the forest, each step taking her further from the life she had known, further from the rejection and pain that had consumed her heart. As she reached a clearing by a waterfall, Claire stopped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sound of rushing water filled her ears, but it was the silence in her heart that weighed her down the most. She stepped closer to the water, staring at her reflection in the shimmering surface, her face streaked with tears. She had always been the quiet, overlooked Omega, never enough to stand out, never enough to be noticed. But as the cool water lapped at her feet, something changed. A presence behind her made her spin around. Standing in the shadows, watching her, was a man. A tall, imposing figure, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His presence was overwhelming, his aura one of power and strength. Claire felt her heart race, a deep, instinctual pull drawing her to him. As he stepped forward, the moonlight illuminated his face, revealing his sharp features, dark hair, and eyes that shimmered like silver. He was no ordinary man. He was an Alpha, the Alpha King himself. Nathaniel Blackwood, the ruler of the wolves, the one who had been keeping his distance from the pack for years, hiding his true identity. And yet, here he was, standing before her. "You," he said, his voice deep and commanding, yet soft with an unexpected tenderness. "You are the one." His words left Claire breathless. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. The Alpha King, the most powerful man in the land, had found her. The Omega who had been rejected, abandoned, and ignored was now the center of his attention. "I've been watching you," Nathaniel continued, his gaze never leaving her. "I've seen the strength in you, the power you don't even know you have. And now, I will claim you." The words sent a shock through Claire's body, a rush of warmth flooding her chest. She had always known she was meant for something greater, but she had never imagined it would come like this. Nathaniel Blackwood, the Alpha King, was now claiming her as his mate, the one who would stand by his side, and together, they would face everything the world had to throw at them. The world may have rejected her, but in his eyes, she was everything. And that was all that mattered. The moon hung high above the forest, casting a soft glow over the clearing where Claire stood, still caught in the whirlwind of emotions from the encounter with Nathaniel. Her heart raced, not just from the shock of meeting the Alpha King, but from the strange connection she felt pulling her toward him, a bond that was beyond anything she had ever known. Nathaniel took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, his gaze intense yet comforting. "You are stronger than you realize," he said softly, his voice carrying an authority that made her shiver. Claire stood frozen, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to do. This was the Alpha King, the ruler of all wolves, standing before her, and yet, he wasn't just a figure of power. There was something more in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place, but it made her feel seen, understood. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why have you chosen me?" Nathaniel's gaze softened as he took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "I have watched you for some time, Claire. You may not see it, but I do. You have a strength in you that has been hidden from everyone, even yourself." His words stirred something deep inside her, something she had buried for so long. She had always felt overlooked, weak, never fitting in with her pack, always the one who was left behind. And yet here he was, telling her that she had strength, that she mattered. "I've been waiting for you," Nathaniel continued, his voice like a soothing balm to her wounded heart. "But I had to be certain. I had to know that you were the one who could stand beside me, who could handle the weight of what we are destined to face." Claire's mind spun, trying to process everything he was saying. Was she truly worthy of being by his side? Could she really live up to the expectations of the Alpha King? She had spent her entire life feeling like a failure, like she wasn't enough. But Nathaniel's presence, his words, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: hope. He reached out, his hand gentle as it rested on her shoulder. "You don't need to prove anything to me, Claire. You are already enough," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Her heart fluttered at his touch, at the calmness he exuded, the way he made her feel like she belonged. As Claire met his gaze, something shifted within her. She was no longer just the Omega who had been rejected and cast aside. She was something more. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was finally ready to embrace who she truly was. Nathaniel's expression turned more serious, his eyes scanning the forest around them as if sensing something. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The challenges ahead are great, but together, we can face them. Are you ready to take your place beside me?" Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. This was her chance, her moment to prove that she was more than the broken Omega everyone had thought her to be. She nodded slowly, the determination in her eyes matching the fierce resolve that was beginning to bloom in her heart. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and sure. Nathaniel smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made her feel like she could conquer anything. "Then let's begin, Claire. Together, we will change everything." And with that, he extended his hand, not just as the Alpha King, but as her mate, offering her the strength to stand beside him and face whatever the future held. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and anticipation. Claire had taken Nathaniel's hand, and together, they began their journey toward a future that was still unclear, yet brimming with possibilities. The forest they walked through felt alive, the trees towering above them like silent guardians, but even the peace of nature could not quiet the storm inside Claire's heart. She had agreed to stand by Nathaniel, to be his mate, but there was still so much she didn't understand. Nathaniel was no ordinary man, he was the Alpha King, a leader with power beyond anything she could comprehend. And yet, here she was, walking beside him, something she had never dreamed would be possible. They traveled deeper into the heart of his kingdom, a place Claire had only heard of in whispers and legends. The land was vast, stretching beyond what her eyes could see, filled with towering mountains, dense forests, and ancient castles. Nathaniel's kingdom was a place of beauty, but also of great power and responsibility. As they approached a massive stone castle, the gates slowly creaked open, revealing the stronghold that would be their new home. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The castle was unlike anything she had ever seen, a towering fortress that seemed to reach for the sky. The walls were made of dark stone, intricately carved with symbols that Claire didn't recognize, and the air around them hummed with an energy she could feel deep in her bones. This was the Alpha King's home, the place where he ruled, where his power was absolute. As they entered, the sound of footsteps echoed through the grand halls, and Claire couldn't help but feel small, like a stranger in a world she didn't belong to. Nathaniel led her through the castle, his presence commanding the attention of everyone they passed. The servants and warriors they encountered bowed their heads in respect, their eyes filled with awe as they greeted their king. But Claire, despite the respect that Nathaniel commanded, couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of place. This world was so different from the quiet, secluded life she had known. The weight of the expectations, the responsibility that Nathaniel carried, settled heavily on her shoulders. It was one thing to be chosen by the Alpha King, but it was another to actually live up to the role she was meant to play. That evening, as they sat together in the grand dining hall, Claire's mind raced with questions. Nathaniel noticed her silence, his sharp eyes studying her with concern. "You're thinking too much," he said, his voice warm but firm. Claire looked up, meeting his gaze. I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "You are ready, Claire. You have always been ready. You just need to trust yourself. Trust that this is where you belong." His words were a balm to her anxious heart, but doubts still lingered. How could she possibly be enough for him? The powerful Alpha King, who had faced countless challenges and battles, now needed her. She was just an Omega, the one who had always been overlooked. As the night grew darker, the castle's high towers casting long shadows over the land, Claire felt the weight of her new reality settle around her. This was her new life, a life by Nathaniel's side. But the path ahead was still uncertain. She didn't know what challenges awaited them, what trials they would face, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer the broken Omega who had been cast aside. With Nathaniel, she was something more. She was his mate, and together, they would face whatever came their way. The following days were filled with new experiences and challenges for Claire as she settled into her new life in the Alpha King's castle. Nathaniel, though strong and commanding, showed a side of himself she hadn't expected. He was patient with her, teaching her about his world, his responsibilities, and the intricate balance of power that kept his kingdom intact. Every night, they would sit together by the fire, Claire listening intently as Nathaniel spoke of the history of the wolves, the alliances, and the enemies that surrounded them. He spoke of the responsibility that came with his crown, the weight of being the Alpha King, and the burdens of leadership that were never far from his mind. Despite the grandeur of the castle and the respect people had for Nathaniel, Claire began to see a different side of him, a man who, beneath the power, carried a heavy heart. "It is not always easy," Nathaniel confessed one evening as they watched the flames dance in the hearth. "To lead. To make decisions that affect so many lives. Sometimes I wish I could just live for myself, but the weight of my duty is always with me." Claire, though still unsure of her place, could sense the truth in his words. She knew, despite his strength and stature, he wasn't invincible. He carried his own fears, his own doubts. It made him more real to her, more human, and she found herself growing closer to him with each passing day. Yet, as they spent more time together, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had agreed to stand by Nathaniel's side, to be his mate, but she hadn't truly understood the full extent of what that meant. The castle was beautiful, but it was also a place filled with expectations, rules, and customs that she had never been a part of. She was still the Omega, the one who had been overlooked, and now, she had to learn to navigate the complexities of being by the side of the Alpha King. One evening, as Claire wandered through the castle gardens, she found herself by the same waterfall where she had first met Nathaniel. The moonlight bathed the water in silver, and she stood there, lost in thought. She wasn't sure what was troubling her. Perhaps it was the isolation she still felt, or the weight of the life she was stepping into. "You're here again," Nathaniel's voice startled her, and she turned to find him standing behind her, his expression soft. He had a way of appearing when she needed him most, and she had grown to appreciate his presence. "I needed some air," Claire replied, forcing a smile. "It feels like everything is moving so fast. I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of this." Nathaniel stepped closer, his gaze gentle but unwavering. "You don't have to be ready right now. You're not alone in this, Claire. We'll face everything together." His words, though simple, brought her a sense of calm she hadn't expected. She wasn't alone. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt like she belonged, like she had a place in this world. Nathaniel extended his hand, his eyes offering her silent reassurance. "Come with me. Let's walk. The night is ours." And with that, Claire took his hand, the uncertainty she had been carrying for days beginning to fade. She had chosen this path, and while it was not easy, she knew Nathaniel would be by her side, guiding her through the darkness, just as he had promised. As they walked beneath the stars, Claire finally felt like she was no longer just the Omega, lost in the shadows of her past. She was Claire Sanders, and with Nathaniel, she would find her way forward. The next few days passed in a blur for Claire. Nathaniel's presence, once a source of uncertainty and apprehension, began to feel like a steady anchor. They spent more time together, walking through the grand halls of the castle, talking late into the night, and slowly building a connection that was far deeper than either of them had expected. Nathaniel showed her the intricacies of his kingdom, teaching her about the delicate balance of power that he maintained, and the responsibilities that came with being the Alpha King. Despite the weight of leadership, Nathaniel always made time for them. They would sit by the fire, and he would share stories of his past, his triumphs, his struggles, and his family. His life had not been easy, and it made Claire realize just how much he had sacrificed for his people. In turn, Claire opened up to him as well. She shared her fears, her dreams, and the loneliness that had haunted her for most of her life. The more she spoke, the more she understood that the Alpha King was not just a ruler, he was a man with his own doubts, his own insecurities. They were both learning to navigate their shared path, and though it was not always easy, it felt like they were building something real, something worth fighting for. One evening, after a long day of exploring the castle's grounds, Nathaniel took Claire to the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold. Claire couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place. The garden was unlike any she had ever seen, lush, vibrant, filled with flowers that seemed to bloom in every shade of the rainbow. "I wanted to show you something," Nathaniel said as he guided her toward a secluded part of the garden. As they walked, Claire noticed the small details, the way Nathaniel's hand brushed against the flowers, the quiet confidence in his movements. It was clear that he had a deep connection to this land, a bond that went beyond his role as a ruler. They reached a small stone bench nestled under a tree, its branches heavy with fruit. Nathaniel gestured for Claire to sit. "This place," he began, "has always been special to me. It's where I come when I need to clear my mind, to find peace." Claire sat beside him, feeling the warmth of his presence, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, taking in the serenity of the garden. Nathaniel smiled softly, his eyes gazing out over the flowers. "I thought you'd like it. Sometimes, in the midst of everything, it's easy to forget the simple things, the moments of peace that can be found in nature." Claire nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Her life had been filled with chaos and confusion, but here, in this quiet corner of the world, it felt like she could breathe. It was a strange but comforting thought to know that this was her reality now, this beautiful, peaceful place with Nathaniel by her side. As they sat there, the silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes about trust, about understanding, about the bond that was slowly growing between them. "Thank you," Claire said after a long pause, her voice barely audible. Nathaniel turned to look at her, his expression softening. "For what?" he asked, his tone gentle. Claire met his gaze, her heart swelling with gratitude. "For showing me this. For showing me that there's more to life than what I've known. You've made me feel like I matter." Nathaniel's gaze softened even further, and for a moment, Claire saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "You've always mattered, Claire," he said quietly. "I've always seen it. You just had to see it for yourself." His words, so simple yet so powerful, left Claire speechless. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to express the gratitude and emotions that were swirling inside her. Instead, she just sat there, beside him, feeling the warmth of the moment, the strength of their connection growing with every passing second. It was a moment of peace, of clarity, and for the first time, Claire felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, the air in the castle felt different. It was crisp and fresh, a promise of new beginnings. Claire had spent the night reflecting on the peaceful moments she shared with Nathaniel, and now, as the sun's first light streamed through the grand windows, she felt something stir within her, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was Nathaniel's mate, and that changed everything. As she walked through the halls of the castle, Claire felt the eyes of the staff on her. There was a certain quiet respect in their gaze, but also curiosity. They hadn't fully accepted her yet. After all, she was still an outsider in this world of power, dominance, and royal tradition. But that didn't bother Claire as much as it used to. She had Nathaniel by her side, and that made her feel like she could face anything. That morning, Nathaniel found her in the castle's library, sitting near the large window, her fingers gently tracing the pages of a book. She looked peaceful, absorbed in her thoughts, yet there was something in her eyes, something that made Nathaniel stop and watch her for a moment. "You're deep in thought," he said, his voice soft but strong, breaking the silence. Claire looked up, surprised at his sudden appearance, but her smile was instant and warm. "I was just thinking," she said, closing the book in front of her. "About everything. About us." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, stepping closer to where she sat. "What about us?" he asked, his tone teasing but filled with genuine curiosity. Claire took a deep breath. "I never imagined that I would be here, in this castle, by your side," she said. "I was just an Omega. A forgotten one. Now, I'm your mate. And I'm still learning what that means." Nathaniel knelt beside her, placing his hand on hers gently. "You're not just my mate, Claire. You're so much more than that. You've always been strong, even when you didn't know it. I saw it the moment I met you." Claire met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. There was sincerity in his eyes, a depth of understanding that made her heart swell. "I'm still trying to figure things out," Claire said quietly. "But with you, I feel like I can do anything." Nathaniel smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then let's figure it out together," he said. "I know you're capable of more than you realize. You'll see." His words, though simple, filled Claire with a sense of confidence she hadn't known before. The doubts that had lingered in her heart began to fade, replaced with a growing sense of certainty. She had made the right choice in standing by Nathaniel's side. He wasn't just a king, he was her partner, her equal, and together, they could face anything. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activities. Nathaniel showed Claire more of the castle and its grounds, introducing her to people who would become important parts of her life. The servants, the warriors, even the nobles, all seemed to acknowledge her with newfound respect. As night fell, Claire found herself in the grand dining hall, sitting beside Nathaniel. The banquet was grand, filled with laughter and conversation, but Claire couldn't help but notice the subtle difference in the way people treated her now. She was no longer the overlooked Omega. She was the Alpha King's mate, and that meant something. As the evening drew to a close, Claire and Nathaniel stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars above were brilliant, the sky vast and endless. It was a quiet moment, one they shared without words, just the sound of their footsteps on the gravel path. Nathaniel turned to her, his hand brushing against hers. "How do you feel now?" he asked, his voice soft. Claire looked up at him, feeling the weight of everything she had learned in the past few days. "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said, her voice steady with confidence. "With you." Nathaniel smiled, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them under the stars. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, but for now, it was enough to simply be in each other's presence, knowing that they had already begun to build something beautiful and strong. The days began to blur together as Claire adapted to her new life beside Nathaniel. The castle, once so overwhelming, now felt like home, and the people who had once watched her with curiosity and doubt now treated her with respect. As the Alpha King's mate, she no longer stood on the outside looking in. She was part of something far greater than she had ever imagined. Nathaniel continued to guide her, not just in the ways of the castle and the pack, but in the quiet moments that spoke of a deeper bond forming between them. He took her to the castle's library, where she spent hours reading about the history of his people, the traditions of the pack, and the stories of past rulers. Nathaniel would sit beside her, offering insights, his hand occasionally brushing against hers in silent acknowledgement of their growing connection. One afternoon, as Claire sat at a grand table in the library, flipping through an old manuscript, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Nathaniel standing there, his eyes thoughtful as he studied her. "You're learning quickly," he remarked, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's important," Claire said, closing the book. "I need to understand everything. This life, it's nothing like what I thought it would be. Nathaniel nodded, his expression softening. It's a lot to take in. But you're doing more than just learning about this world, Claire. You're becoming a part of it. His words resonated with her. She had spent her life feeling like an outsider, never fully belonging, but now, with Nathaniel, she felt like she was truly being seen. He was not just the Alpha King, but someone who valued her for who she was, not just her status or position. As the weeks passed, the bond between them deepened. They spent more time together, their conversations stretching into the night, sometimes about the kingdom, other times about their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. Claire learned more about Nathaniel than she had ever expected to know. He spoke of the loss of his parents, of the weight of his crown, and the loneliness that often accompanied his position. I always thought I could rule alone, Nathaniel confessed one evening as they walked through the castle gardens. But with you, it's different. I don't have to do this alone anymore. Claire looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. You never did, she said softly. You just had to find someone who could stand beside you, not behind you. Nathaniel stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them, a shared realization of the bond they had forged. And you, Claire, he said, his voice steady. You were always meant to stand beside me. The words, simple but powerful, filled Claire with a sense of peace. She wasn't just Nathaniel's mate, she was his equal, his partner, and together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. That evening, as they returned to the castle, Claire felt a quiet sense of purpose that she had never known before. She had found her place in the world, beside the man who had not only claimed her as his mate, but had also given her the space to be herself. It wasn't just the title of Alpha King's mate that mattered, it was the bond they shared, the understanding, the love that was quietly growing between them. As the castle loomed ahead, its towers silhouetted against the night sky, Claire knew that this was only the beginning. Together, she and Nathaniel would carve out their future, one step at a time. The days continued to pass peacefully, but there was a growing sense of anticipation in the air. Nathaniel and Claire had settled into their routine, but beneath the calm surface, something was stirring, a challenge neither of them had expected. The Alpha King had spent years ruling with an iron fist, facing countless enemies and challenges, but the responsibility of leadership was no less daunting. As the days grew shorter and the first signs of winter appeared, the kingdom began to feel the pressure of the changing seasons. Nathaniel had always been prepared for battle, for the physical wars that came with his position, but this winter brought with it a different kind of challenge. It was a quiet unrest among the pack, a feeling of unease that had begun to spread like a shadow over their land. One evening, as Claire stood by the grand windows of the castle, gazing out at the vast expanse of land stretching before her, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. The wind carried a chill, and the sky was painted with streaks of crimson and gold as the sun set behind the mountains. She had learned to read the signs of nature, the way the earth seemed to respond to the moods of the pack, and tonight, something felt different. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Nathaniel, sensing her unease, approached her quietly, his presence strong but gentle. He stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers as he looked out at the horizon. What is it? Claire asked softly, her voice filled with concern. Nathaniel sighed, his gaze lingering on the far distance. There's unrest in the pack, he said, his tone low, his brow furrowing slightly. I can feel it. I've kept the peace for years, but even the strongest foundations can crack. Claire turned to him, her heart tightening with worry. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel met her gaze, his eyes dark with the weight of his thoughts. It means that something is coming. I don't know what, but I feel the shift. There's a storm on the horizon, Claire. And we need to be ready. Claire's heart raced at his words. She had always known that Nathaniel's life as Alpha King was filled with challenges, but she had never imagined how much burden rested on his shoulders. She had seen his strength, his leadership, but now, as he spoke of the uncertainty ahead, she realized just how fragile that strength could be. What can we do? Claire asked, her voice steady despite the fear that was beginning to creep into her chest. Nathaniel turned to her, a small, reassuring smile on his lips. We face it together, he said, his voice filled with conviction. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Claire nodded, the weight of his words settling in her heart. She knew that her place was by his side, not just as his mate, but as his partner in everything. Together, they had already overcome so much. And now, as the uncertainty of the future loomed over them, she knew that they would face it as a united front. The rest of the evening passed in silence, the weight of the unknown hanging heavy in the air. But despite the unease, Claire felt a sense of peace. Nathaniel had always been her protector, her guide, and she knew that with him, there was nothing they couldn't face. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Claire stood beside Nathaniel, knowing that whatever the future held, they would stand strong together. The storm may be coming, but with Nathaniel by her side, she was no longer afraid. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, Claire could feel the weight of Nathaniel's words pressing down on her. The storm he had predicted was coming closer, and she could sense it in the way the pack had begun to behave. There was a tension in the air, a restlessness that couldn't be ignored. Even Nathaniel, usually so calm and in control, had started to show signs of concern. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of the castle's garden, Claire noticed the subtle changes in him. His brow furrowed more often, and his gaze was distant, as if he were constantly searching for something that he couldn't quite find. "What's bothering you?" Claire asked, her voice soft but filled with the concern she could no longer hide. Nathaniel glanced at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Nothing that you need to worry about," he said, but Claire could see through the lie. She had seen enough of him by now to know when something was wrong. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice more firm this time. "You're not alone in this. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Nathaniel sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly as if the weight of the world had settled on them. "I know," he replied quietly. "But there are things that are out of my control. I can feel the unrest in the pack, the growing distrust. I've tried to keep the peace, but it's becoming harder." Claire's heart sank at his words. She had seen the signs, the subtle whispers among the pack, the way some of the warriors had begun to look at Nathaniel with doubt in their eyes. The unity that had once held them together was starting to crack, and she knew that soon, they would be forced to confront whatever lay ahead. "What can I do?" Claire asked, her voice filled with determination. Nathaniel turned to her, his gaze intense. "You've already done more than you realize," he said softly. "Just being here, standing by my side, gives me strength. But now, I need you to help me do something I've never done before." "What is it?" Claire asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Nathaniel reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I need you to help me find a way to restore the trust of the pack," he said. "I can't do it alone. They need to see that we are united, that we are stronger together." Claire nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She had never imagined that her role as Nathaniel's mate would involve so much responsibility, but she knew that she couldn't back down now. The future of the pack and Nathaniel's reign depended on it. Over the next few days, Nathaniel and Claire worked together to meet with the key members of the pack. They spoke with the elders, the warriors, and the betas, listening to their concerns and fears. It wasn't easy, but slowly, Claire began to see the walls of distrust crumble. She spoke from the heart, sharing her own experiences, her own struggles, and how she had come to understand the true meaning of loyalty and unity. Nathaniel stood by her, not as the Alpha King, but as her partner, allowing her to take the lead in many of the discussions. It wasn't just about his power anymore, it was about their partnership, their shared future. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting, Claire and Nathaniel stood together on the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The night sky stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. "We've done it," Claire said, her voice filled with relief. "The pack trusts us again." Nathaniel nodded, his arm wrapping around her waist as he pulled her close. "Together," he said, his voice full of pride. "We've done it together." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. For the first time since arriving at the castle, she felt truly at peace. They had faced the storm together, and now, they were stronger for it. As they stood there, watching the stars above, Claire knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have Nathaniel by her side. And with him, she could face anything.